I've not the pleasure of understanding you. Of what are you talking?
Hi, welcome to another video in my series of Pride and Prejudice character analysis. Now in this video I want to look at Mr. Bennet because I see him as one of my favourite characters despite his flaws.
You want to tell me, and I have no objection to hearing it.
Mr. Bennet is the patriarch of the Bennet family in Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice and is one of literature's most intriguing father figures. Witty and ironic, yet often frustratingly passive, he embodies a mix of humour and human flaws, and in this video I'll examine Mr. Bennet's life, his relationships and his role in the story. And I'll be using clips from the 95 adaptation because why not? It's my favourite adaptation after all. Now I'll explore his sharp wit, his parental failings, and also some moments of surprising depth. Mr. Bennet is the master of Longbourn, a modest estate in Hertfordshire, which provides his family with their home and income. Now he likely inherited Longbourn, as was customary for gentlemen of his social rank. The estate's entailment, which is a legal stipulation that it must pass to a male heir, adds to the Bennets' precarious situation. Without a son to inherit, Longbourn is destined for Mr. Bennet's distant cousin, Mr. Collins.
It is from my cousin, Mr. Collins, who, when I am dead, may turn you all out of this house as soon as he pleases.
An arrangement such as an entailment, while designed to preserve the property within a family line, often left daughters, like the Bennets, vulnerable to financial uncertainty. While Jane Austen gives us little information about Mr. Bennet's life before his marriage, his love of books and sharp intellect suggest a man who once had grander aspirations. However, over time, his life became defined by his retreat into detachment and humour as coping mechanisms. Mr. Bennet's marriage to Mrs. Bennet is both entertaining and bittersweet. Initially, he was likely attracted to her beauty and charm, but over time, her nerves and superficiality clashed with his intellect and sardonic nature. Now, in the novel, Mr. Bennet admits to Elizabeth that he married her for her looks and was soon disillusioned by her lack of depth. This realization probably led him to have a detached attitude that often bordered on disdain.
Not by any to be enterprised lightly or wantonly to satisfy man's carnal lusts and appetites.
Mrs. Bennet, for her part, is left to manage the family's fortune. Now, I'll cover her story in another video, I'm sure. Her obsession with finding husbands for her daughters may seem exaggerated, but it stems from a genuine concern about her financial security. Mr. Bennet's indifference forces her to bear this burden alone, albeit in ways that undermine her intentions. This shows us one side of Mr. Bennet's failings. The following clip, which I always used to find quite funny, makes me see a new light on Mr. Bennet's failings, and actually I now find it quite moving how Alison Steadman's performance really tugs at my heartstrings, because I see her showing Mrs. Bennet suddenly realising that she's trying to do her best for her daughters and their future, and the task is left to herself with little help from Mr. Bennet. She is in utter despair.
Let us flatter ourselves that I might outlive you.
There's a website called Lady Gilrain, and I'll leave a link in the description. It's a comparison made between the 1995 and the 2005 adaptation, and it's a hilarious read. Go and check it out. In fact, if I can find it and do it, I'll put a link up here. Now, the comparison concerns the Bennet's marriage and how it's portrayed in the 2005 version as opposed to the 95 version. And the following is written, and I quote, "Mr. and Mrs. Bennet's being in love? Seriously?" I've only seen the 2005 version once, so you know, in that version, are Mr. and Mrs. Bennet supposed to be in love? I can't remember. So obviously in this quote, Mr. and Mrs. Bennet being in love? Seriously? The whole point of their relationship is to demonstrate how even the most intelligent person, in this case Mr. Bennet, can find himself chained for life to a complete fool simply because of a hasty marriage brought on by a physical passion. They're meant to be hopelessly incompatible. Their marriage is a disaster. Austen is making a point here. Think with your brain, not your penis. Although I'm sure she didn't say that word. But it does make you think, doesn't it? The comparison between the 2005 and the 1995 adaptation. Which one shows the relationship truer to the book?
I am sick of Mr. Bingley.
I'm sorry to hear that. If I'd known as much this morning, I should never have called on him.
Mr. Bennet's wit is one of his most memorable traits. He sees through the pretensions of others with remarkable clarity, often using humour to highlight their absurdities.
About a month ago, I received this letter. And about a fortnight ago, I answered it, for I thought it was a case of some delicacy in requiring early attention.
For example, his reaction to Mr. Collins and Lady Catherine de Bourgh shows his disdain for adulation and entitlement.
Can you be a sensible man, sir?
Oh, I think not, my dear. Indeed, I have great hopes of finding him quite the reverse.
However, his humour can also be a shield, allowing him to distance himself from the challenges of parenting and marriage. While his observations are sharp, his refusal to act on them often exacerbates the very problems he's critiquing. For example, his dismissal of Lydia's behaviour as mere silliness when confronted by Elizabeth blinds him to the potential consequences of her recklessness.
Our life holds few distinctions, Mrs. Bennet, but I think we may safely boast that here sit two of the silliest girls in the country.
As a father, Mr. Bennet's shortcomings are evident. He openly favours Elizabeth for her intelligence, while dismissing Lydia and Kitty as frivolous, actually in his words, silly girls. This favouritism creates an imbalance in the household, leaving Jane and Elizabeth to shoulder the family's responsibilities. And what are these responsibilities, you may ask? Well, if Mr. Bennet did the correct thing, he'd be concerned about the reputation and harmony of the family. Elizabeth often acts as the voice of reason in the family. She confronts inappropriate behaviour, like Lydia's recklessness, and tries to mitigate the social consequences. For example, Elizabeth directly warns her father about allowing Lydia to go to Brighton, recognising the potential for scandal.
Excuse me, I must speak plainly. If you do not take the trouble to check her, she will soon be beyond the reach of amendment. Her character will be fixed as the most determined flirt that ever made herself and her family ridiculous.
Jane, on the other hand, has a gentleness and composure which provides a counterbalance to the chaos created by their mother and younger sisters. While Jane doesn't actively confront anyone, her demeanour helps soften the family public image. Elizabeth often steps in as a mediator between family members, particularly when her father retreats into indifference and her mother becomes overly dramatic. For example, she frequently engages in conversations to diffuse tensions or redirect focus, such as when Mr. Collins arrives or when Mrs. Bennet becomes overwrought.
Mama, have you seen Charlotte Lucas since I came away?
Jane's role as a peacemaker means she often absorbs emotional stress, particularly from her mother, who leans on her as a confidant. So Elizabeth and Jane's maturity contrasts sharply with the irresponsibilities of their parents and younger sisters. Their behaviour sets an example and stabilises the family's image, even if only partially. The responsibilities they shoulder aren't material, like running the household, but social and emotional, preserving what dignity the family can maintain and acting as pillars of stability in an otherwise chaotic environment. And yet Mr. Bennet is not entirely indifferent. When Lydia elopes with Wickham, he takes immediate action, travelling to London to find her. Although it is Darcy who ultimately resolves the situation, Mr. Bennet's efforts show his underlying concern for his family's reputation. This moment, while brief, adds a layer of redemption to his character.
I'm heartily ashamed of myself, Lizzie.
Other characters in Pride and Prejudice offer valuable insights into Mr. Bennet. Mr. Darcy's letter to Elizabeth critiques the Bennet family's behaviour.
The situation of your family, though objectionable, was nothing in comparison with the total want of propriety so frequently betrayed by your mother, your younger sisters,
including Mr. Bennet's lack of control over his household,
and even occasionally your father.
Though Darcy's main focus is on Mrs. Bennet and Lydia, his observations highlight the consequences of Mr. Bennet's indifference. So at the Netherfield ball, Mr. Bennet's public reproach of Mary also provides insight into his character. While his remark about allowing others to perform is humorous, it underscores his discomfort with being embarrassed by his family and his reliance on sarcasm rather than tact. Mr. Bennet's relationship with Elizabeth is one of mutual respect and understanding, making it the most profound connection he has with any of his children. He values her wit, intelligence, and strong moral compass, qualities he seems to see as a reflection of his own better traits. This bond is evident when he supports her decision to refuse Mr. Collins, despite Mrs. Bennet's insistence, demonstrating his belief in Elizabeth's ability to make choices for her own happiness.
Your mother will never see you again if you do not marry Mr. Collins. I will never see you again if you do.
However, Elizabeth is not blind to her father's faults. Now, as I've shown, she rebukes him for his inaction regarding Lydia, revealing the depth of her disappointment. This dynamic adds complexity to their bond, showing that while she admires him, she recognizes his flaws. Perhaps the most moving testament to their bond comes when Elizabeth accepts Mr. Darcy's second proposal. Mr. Bennet's reaction is both humorous and heartfelt. Initially hesitant because of Darcy's reputation, he seeks reassurance from Elizabeth about her feelings. When he realizes the depth of her love and the worthiness of Darcy's character, he tells her,
I could not have parted with you to anyone less worthy, Lizzie.
This moment encapsulates his deep affection and pride in her. I'd like to take a look at Benjamin Whitrow's performance. Now, his performance has often been praised for capturing the nuances of Mr. Bennet's character in ways that other portrayals, well, I'm not going to say capture, but those other portrayals may not have fully realised Mr. Bennet's character. Benjamin Whitrow's subtle delivery of Mr. Bennet's wit and sarcasm is both understated and biting, perfectly mirroring Austen's depiction.
When is your turn to come, Lizzie? You can hardly bear to be long outdone by Jane. Let Wickham be your man. He's a pleasant fellow. He jilts you creditably.
Unlike some portrayals that overplay the comedic aspects of Mr. Bennet, Whitrow balances the humour with quiet gravitas, particularly in moments of vulnerability. For instance, his response to Elizabeth's acceptance of Darcy is a masterclass in restrained emotion, showing a father's pride and affection without becoming overly sentimental. Now, Whitrow also conveys Mr. Bennet's flaws, his passivity and detachment, without making him appear cruel or indifferent.
I'm heartily ashamed of myself, Lizzie. But don't despair. It'll pass. And no doubt more quickly than it should.
This balanced approach allows viewers to see Mr. Bennet as a multi-dimensional character, flawed but deeply human. Compared to other adaptations, such as the 2005 film, where Mr. Bennet leans heavily into a softer, more romanticised version of the character, Whitlow stays truer to Austen's original portrayal. His Mr. Bennet is sardonic yet perceptive, detached yet deeply caring when it truly matters. Perhaps the perfect embodiment of the literary character.
May I ask whether these pleasing attentions proceed from the impulse of the moment, or are they the result of previous study?
In conclusion, then, Mr. Bennet may not be the perfect father or husband, but he is undeniably one of Jane Austen's most enduring and human characters. His sharp wit and his piercing insights into others provide some of the most memorable moments in Pride and Prejudice. Benjamin Whitrow's performance in the 95 adaptation captures this balance beautifully, showing us a man who, while flawed, is deeply aware of the world around him and his family's challenges. His relationship with Elizabeth stands out as a beacon of mutual respect and affection in a household often defined by chaos and absurdity. Their bond provides stability and depth. Through Elizabeth, we see Mr. Bennet's better qualities, his love of intellect, his value for individual happiness, and his willingness to set aside his sarcasm to ensure her future. Ultimately, Mr. Bennet reminds us that even flawed individuals can play vital roles in the lives of those they love. His use of wit and humour may shield him from life's hardships, but they also offer us an honest and enduring portrayal of human complexity. And it's this humanity, with all of its contradictions, that makes Mr. Bennet not just a source of amusement, but also a character of quiet strength.
Shut the door, Lizzie.
And there you have it, my analysis of Mr. Bennet. I do welcome your comments, because I know that as much as I'm giving all of this over to you, and I'm kind of preparing a script to read from, it is my perception. So I miss things, and that's where your comments come in so wonderfully, because we interact. I do make a point of trying to respond to every comment, because I think that's important. If I'm going to give you some kind of video in a little community, then there has to be interaction. You know, you're expecting me to respond. I'm expecting you to drop a comment. There's no point just putting a video out there and then ignoring everybody. It's great. I love it. I love the fact that I've now got, what have I got, 10 or so Pride and Prejudice videos. And it's just going so well. Yes, I've got loads of Beatles ones as well, but the Beatles doesn't seem to be as popular as Pride and Prejudice, probably for good reason. Jane Austen's been around a lot longer. Now, I am trying to push these out as quickly as possible. Come December, my work is putting me on furlough because I'm an IT contractor, and I only get paid when I work. So they're doing this Christmas furlough. They've done it for the last couple of years. No need for contractors. We don't need you. So what that means is I'm going to try and push out the rest of the analysis. So I've got Jane to do, Kitty, Mrs. Bennet. I've got the Gardners to do, the Bingley sisters. I think I'll do them as a combined one. Mr. Bingley and Mr. Darcy. Have I missed anyone? Hill? I don't think I could do Hill, can I? Hill! She's the housekeeper. That's all you need to know. So yeah, watch out for that, because, you know, I'm going to try and churn out as many as I can rather than leaving it a whole month between videos. So don't forget to hit the like and subscribe, even sharing. I know that sharing seems to hit the algorithm and it works really well. But I had this wonderful comment came up, and it's saying, you know, why is this content creator not reached 20,000 subscribers yet? And all I can say is, I don't know. It's down to you. If you watch the videos and you enjoy them, then not only hit the subscribe. It doesn't cost anything, does it? Because if you're watching the video, even if you're not subscribed, more of my videos will appear in your home feed. So you might as well just subscribe, right? Okay, that's it for now. That was Mr. Bennet, and yeah, as I said at the beginning, one of my favourite characters. I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.